Despite all these changes and the proliferation of idol worship, a small minority of people in Arabia still maintained this monotheistic belief in Allah. These monotheists were known as the Hunafa, or the singular, the Hanif, meaning those who turned away from idol worship and turned toward Allah himself. These Hunafa would sometimes retreat to caves in the mountains around Mecca for spiritual contemplation, much like Muhammad himself would do before receiving his first revelation in the cave of Hira. This represented a continuous thread of monotheistic tradition that had never completely died out, despite this sort of pagan takeover. So by the time of Muhammad's birth in 570 AD, the Kaaba had a complex and layered religious significance. On one hand, it was the center of the Arabian polytheist pagan sort of takeover, housing all these different idols. On the other hand, it still retained the elements of the Abrahamic heritage, including the black stone and sort of the basic ritual practices, and the widespread recognition that it had been built as a house for one God by Abraham. This dual identity, both as this pagan shrine and a structure for Allah, would prove crucial during the early days of Islam. It allowed Muhammad to reclaim the Kaaba for monotheism without completely rejecting the cultural and historical significance it held to the people. He could also present his message not as something entirely new, but as a return to the original purpose of the Kaaba, as the pure house of Allah created by Adam and then rebuilt by Abraham as it had been known for centuries. So now we've seen how the Kaaba has gone from Adam's original place of worship to Abraham's reconstruction to then a pagan house of idols, and this is where we get to Muhammad. The birth of him in 570 AD, this is a pivotal point in understanding Islam, of course, as well as the Kaaba's role. By the time Muhammad was born, the Kaaba had been under control of its own tribe, the Quresh, for generations. They were the masters of Mecca. And the Kaaba was essentially, their golden goose, right? They basically thought if they controlled the most important religious site in Arabia, which brought them not only tremendous prestige, but also a ton of economic benefit for the flow of pilgrims and traders, which is why some people have alleged, it kind of makes sense, it becomes a pagan site because the more people that go to worship, the more money you can make. The Quresh had developed a whole economic system around the Kaaba and its season. They organized trade fairs to coincide with religious gatherings, created a calendar of sacred months when fighting was prohibited, and collected various fees and offerings from visitors. In many ways, they were brilliant business operators who understood the connection between religion and commerce. Muhammad's earliest connection to the Kaaba came long before his prophetic mission began. This was when he was about 35 years old, still an ordinary merchant with no idea of the religious role that he was going to fulfill. The Kaaba needed significant repairs, right? This is what we mentioned earlier. This flooding had come in and damaged the walls. There had been a fire that weakened the structure. So the Quresh decided it was time for a renovation. They dismantled the Kaaba down to its foundation, began rebuilding it only using pure money for this sacred task. No funds obtained through gambling, prostitution, or other dubious means would be accepted. This limited their budget considerably, forcing them to build the smaller Kaaba like we mentioned before. What we didn't mention is, as the rebuild was nearing its completion, a serious problem emerged. Who would have the honor of returning the sacred black stone to its place in the eastern corner? Various Quraysh sub-clans began arguing over the task. Remember, these were, proud tribal Arabs for whom the honor was deadly serious, and the matter almost escalated to bloodshed. The deadlock continued for several days until someone suggested that they let the next person to enter the sanctuary make the decision. As fate would have it, that person was who else than Muhammad. Peace be upon him. Just assume peace be upon him for all of them, okay? I don't want to get in trouble with the Muslims, all right? Who had the reputation for fairness and wisdom? His nickname was Al-Amin, meaning the trustworthy one. Muhammad's solution was simple and brilliant. He asked for a cloth to be spread out and placed the black stone in the center. Then he invited a representative from each of the quarreling clans to grasp an edge of the cloth and lift it together. When they had raised the stone to the right height, Muhammad himself stepped in and positioned it in its corner. Everyone was satisfied with the outcome. Each clan had participated equally in the sacred task, and bloodshed was avoided. It's a really interesting and cool moment in history, right? The future prophet of Islam, still years away from receiving his first revelation, already playing a crucial role in the Kaaba's story. And in retrospect, it seems almost symbolic of how Muhammad would later unite all of these same tribes under the banner of Islam. Fast forward several years, and everything had changed. Muhammad had received revelations declaring that there was only one God, and he began preaching against idol worship and faced increasing persecution from the Quresh, who saw his monotheistic message as a threat to their Kaaba-centered ecosystem. Basically, the Quraysh was like, hey, if a bunch of people are coming here, we're making more money, but now you're saying there's only one God, that's going to affect our bottom line. Eventually, the pressure became so intense that Muhammad and his followers fled Mecca from Medina in 622 AD. This is known as the famous Hijrah that marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar. During his time in Medina, Muslims prayed facing Jerusalem. But according to Islamic tradition, around 16 months after the Hijrah, Muhammad received a revelation while leading prayers, instructing him to change the Qibla. This is the prayer direction from Jerusalem to the Kaaba in Mecca. The Quran describes the moment like this: "We have seen you turning your face toward heaven, so we will surely turn you toward a Qibla with which you will be pleased. So turn your face toward al-Masjid al-Haram." This was a pivotal moment that reconnected Islam to the Abrahamic legacy of the Kaaba. By directing prayers toward the Kaaba, even while it still housed idols, Muhammad was signaling that his mission wasn't to establish something entirely new, but to restore the pure monotheism of Abraham that had been corrupted over time. The story culminates in 630 AD when Muhammad returned to Mecca at the head of an army of 10,000 Muslims. After years of conflict, the Quraysh surrendered the city without a fight. Muhammad's first act upon entering Mecca was to go directly to the Kaaba. He circled it 7 times on his camel, then entered the sanctuary itself. Inside, he faced the ultimate symbolic moment of his mission. The Kaaba contained 360 idols representing various tribal deities from all over Arabia, and Muhammad destroyed them all, reportedly reciting as he did so, quote, "Truth has come, and falsehood has vanished. Indeed, falsehood is bound to vanish." Bars. With his act, the Kaaba was restored to its original purpose as the center of the worship of Allah. So now we've gotten to the point in the story where the Kaaba has now been reclaimed by Muhammad and by the followers of Allah to be the house of monotheistic worship of the one God. But that does not mean that the Kaaba has been unchanged since then. You know, some ancient buildings just seem to sit there forever. Well, the Kaaba isn't one. Despite its simple appearance, the sacred cube has had quite the eventful history. I mean, floods, fires, warfare, thefts, reconstructions, all sorts of things. So first off, something that surprises many people, the Kaaba we see today isn't exactly the same structure that existed in Muhammad's time. In fact, it's been rebuilt either partially or completely 12 times through recorded history. Think about that. A building so sacred to millions of people that they face their direction 5 times a day in prayer has been basically rebuilt and reconstructed into a more perfect version. Notice how it says direction. People don't pray to the Kaaba. I think this is a big thing that I didn't really know growing up, not growing up Muslim. I never understood it. It's not a prayer to the Kaaba. They pray in the direction of the Kaaba. And again, this is called the Qibla. So if the Kaaba was ever destroyed, like history has shown us, people would still pray in the same direction regardless. The first major damage occurred soon after Muhammad's death by 683, just 50 years after Muhammad had cleansed the Kaaba of idols. The Muslim community was experiencing its first civil war.